And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Since time immemorial, Indigenous women have been in the front lines of change in their communities. On today's Open Connection, we meet with Michelle Bryant.
My traditional name is Bilham Nah, which stands in the House of Leas, and I was given this name by my great grandfather William Jeffrey, previous Samoyed at Leas, and the name stands beside his name. So it once belonged to his sister, and it means pearl on the fin of the killer whale. As Indigenous people, we have an oral tradition. It's not necessarily written down. And in today's society, when everything is, it's on the phone, it's on the iPad, it's on the computer, and it wasn't really our ways. I always remember growing up, and I always wondered why, as a young child, my grandfather would tell me the same things over and over again, and not realizing until I got older that he was really practicing and demonstrating our oral tradition. And, I remember saying to him as a child, saying, "Grandpa, you told me this already," and not fully realizing. And I think today's kids don't fully realize the importance of that, and the importance of how those stories got carried generation to generation to generation, and how they really define our culture and what's important to us. I spent almost every weekend and every school holiday and the summers with my grandparents in Loch Lance growing up. So, my grandma would take me out berry picking and spending time with her brothers and sisters and her parents. And that really defined the level of respect that I carried with me growing up and helped shape that. But one of the things that was always talked about when I was visiting with my aunts and my great aunts and uncles was the importance of education, and how that was going to be the key to our success as Indigenous people. Recognizing the detrimental effects of the residential school system on our people, and those same great aunts and uncles going to residential school telling me the importance of education. But what I learned from that is they saw the evolution of the detrimental effects that they experienced going to residential school. But, in my generation, it's not the same, and that education is going to be the key to move forward. So I taught in Haida Gwaii, I taught in Nanaimo, I taught in Prince Rupert and in Loch Lance. And my last year was as the vice principal at the school in Loch Lance. And an opportunity presented to me while I was in Loch Lance. I had met the then president and board of directors of Ridley Terminals, and I had brought my class to a board meeting that they were holding, and they were making an announcement. Growing up in Prince Rupert all my life, and the terminal I'd been there, a majority of that time, I didn't really know what it was, or I knew there was a coal terminal out there. I didn't really know, anybody that worked there or really anything about it. So I'm asking these questions, very pointed questions at the meeting, for the benefit of my students, and, basically call them out, for doing business on our territory and not really providing benefits to our people. And asked, you said, it's nice that you're announcing these initiatives, but how is that going to systemically help our people? We need corporate to move away from tokenism and, giving what I call, trinkets in return for doing business in our territories. They asked me to consult for them on how to do better for the community, which then led to a job offer. So the opportunity presented itself because of a very pointed question. By doing business in our territories, how are you going to benefit our people? How are you going to provide jobs that are more than just seasonal jobs, but career jobs for my students that are standing here today? Because, if they want to live and work in our territories, they need to know what that process is going to look like. So that's kind of how I got to the corporate world. And I've been there ever since. Coming August, it'll be 10 years for me at Ridley Terminals. I kind of set out with a blank slate because there was nobody in this role prior to me, and designed what that would look like, and really went out and met with key community stakeholders. I met with the First Nations surrounding Ridley, and asked the questions and had the dialogue, which to my understanding was never done from big industry in the past. What are your needs in the community? Where are the gaps, and how can we as industry help fill those gaps and support those needs? And we did that both in the Indigenous communities as well as the community of Prince Rupert and Port Edward.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. According to the Government of Canada's website, nearly 1 in 2 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer during their lifetime. Let us return to the conversation as Michelle shares what happened when she felt a lump in her breast.
My family and I went on a vacation to Hawaii in December of 2019. And when we got back, I felt a lump in my breast. I was, getting ready for bed, taking my clothes off, and, just rubbing the area where my bra band was. And I felt this little marble-sized lump. And it was like my heart stopped in a moment because I knew in that instant what that was. It was in between Christmas and New Year's, so everything was closed. I had to wait till January to get an appointment to see my doctor. And she scheduled a biopsy she scheduled a diagnostic mammogram and a biopsy. And in Prince Rupert at that time, we didn't have a mammogram technician, so I had to wait for an appointment in Terrace, and that wasn't until February. When that appointment happened, I went up. It was on February 11th. I remember the day. And my husband and my mom drove me up to Terrace, and I had the mammogram. And, when you're sitting in the machine and I'm looking at the technician, and I can see in her eyes like that it was cancer. And then she immediately said, we're going to schedule a biopsy today and an ultrasound as well. So I go into the other room to have my ultrasound done, and I see the look in her eyes, and it's the same look as the mammogram tech. And the doctor came in to do the needle biopsy, and they informed me that the results could take 2 to 4 days before my doctor had them in Prince Rupert. So waiting is the worst feeling. I knew in my gut that it was cancer. And I knew in my gut from the moment I felt the lump back in December that this wasn't going to shape who I was. This wasn't going to make me a victim. This was going to empower me to push harder, to fight harder, and to overcome whatever comes in my path. Several years before, I started doing, some of my own healing work from, childhood traumas, and doing that deep internal work to clear that traumas, because I didn't want to live with those limiting beliefs that I had lived with for most of my life. And so when I got the diagnosis, I called my team at Cornerstones, and, we started energy therapy. And I had done energy therapy periodically prior to diagnosis as a real recharge of my body to make sure it just made me feel good. When I felt depleted and my energy levels were low, I'd book myself an energy appointment, and they'd work on me and clear out any energy blockages that I had in my body. So I called the team, and they rallied and they came together, and I had up to 5 people working on me at times prior to the COVID shutdown. And once a week up until I started my chemotherapy at the end of March. And once chemotherapy started, they worked on me the day before chemo and the day after chemo. And because we were isolated and we were shut down due to COVID, we were doing distant energy. So I'd be lying on my bed in my room and they would be in their houses and we would just connect in with each other. So, connecting with each other and energetically and go through the processes. And part of the energy work is that internal healing as well. So it's not just clearing the energy blockages, but it's going to those deep, dark places that we need to go to that we don't often want to go to because we don't want to feel that pain or that hurt again. But I knew that in order to clear that pain and that hurt, I needed to go to those places and let that go. And what I've learned from my coaches is that it's a choice and you could make it easy or you could make it hard. I chose to make it easy. My whole life I've been making it hard by not dealing with it. But now it was the time for me to clear that up.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Major life changes literally shake up our world and invite or pressure us to interact with life in new ways. Let us return to the conversation as Michelle shares what she decided to do.
Because of the diagnosis, that things needed to change. I couldn't push myself as hard and as much basically to the point of exhaustion anymore, because that's not serving me. And I really needed to wake up to taking care of me and allowing others to take care of me, which is not easy to do for someone like me, someone who's so driven, so independent, and so used to doing everything on my own. I had to lean on my support system. I had to lean on my husband. I had to lean on my children. And in the beginning, that was really uncomfortable for me. And also not being used to not doing something. It was go, 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 go. I got used to that and it became my normal. And when I couldn't do that anymore, it really threw me for a loop, because I'd be at home, recovering in between the chemo sessions or waiting for them to start. And I'm thinking, I gotta be I'm sitting there, I gotta do something. What am I gonna do? And, thinking about things to do in the house, I started organizing things. And it really took me 3 months, 3 months from February well into my chemotherapy sessions to just learn to settle down and quiet myself and not worry about anything that needs to be done or planning to do something. But that's how wound up, how wound tightly I was, that it really took a long time for me to be okay with not doing anything except taking care of myself and preparing for the next chemo session. Depending on your course of treatment, you have to either travel to Prince George or Vancouver. Doesn't matter where you go. If you live in Prince Rupert, both are a long ways. Prince George is an 8-hour drive. Vancouver is a little bit shorter on the plane. Factor in COVID in that situation, you really don't want to fly, so you drive. So for my course of treatment, my doctors recommended that I had to go to Vancouver and have, I can do chemotherapy in Prince Rupert at our hospital there, which was great. The nursing staff and the doctor was absolutely fantastic, really taking care of all of the patients in that department. And it came down to, I had to come down to Vancouver for surgery. I had a mastectomy with a lymph node dissection on my left side last August. And that part went smoothly, knowing, except for, I had a really awful experience at UBC Hospital with the discharge nurse and how I was treated. it was really bad. But when I came back down for radiation, I had to be here for 2 months for 25 rounds of radiation. And that started in September and went to the end of October. Dealing with patient travel in Prince Rupert for that, because of my diagnosis was cancer and because of their policies, it says that any cancer patient traveling has to stay at the cancer lodge, which is, under normal circumstances would be fine. But we're in the height of a pandemic, the height of COVID. I have no immune system. Any cancer patient has no immune system. So I felt more comfortable staying in an Airbnb, which I'm in right now, because there's lack of people coming and going, like different people coming and going from different parts of the province for their treatments. My doctors agreed with me and wrote a letter to patient travel stating that an Airbnb would be better suited to me. And it wasn't like I was asking for anything more than what is typically given to First Nations patients traveling out of town for appointments. If there was any cost above it, I was fully prepared to, bear those myself. But, the way I was treated, I equate to our own people recolonizing us, and going back to the days of the Indian agent, where the Indian agent would tell our people when they can leave the reserve, how long they could leave for, what they could do while they were off the reserve. It's no different from First Nations health benefits telling cancer patients when they can go for their appointments, where they have to stay, and what they are entitled to. Because, the other thing that, staying at the cancer lodge, and I'm not saying it's a bad place to stay, but it's not for everybody. When you're there, your meals are provided for you. And if your appointments are at a time during meal service, you don't get a meal. So you miss it. So they don't save it for you, and you can't cook in your room. There's lots of stipulations. So, if I can use the analogy, not only is it the Indian agent telling you where to go, but it's also, you're going to a residential school-like setting where you have to eat at a certain time. You can only go into your, have to stay in this room. And it's not convenient, and it's not, it doesn't create a safe place for Indigenous people.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Everyone is familiar with coaching. Our favorite world-class athletes wouldn't be where they are today without exceptional coaching. In this final segment of Open Connection, Michelle answers the question of, what is a life coach?
As sick as I was, as tired as I was, I'm like, this needs to change. So I appealed it, and I appealed it, I think 3 times. Still haven't heard from it. But so I looked into the policy, and it does state in the policy that, when you come down for medical travel, you have to stay at the most economical place, unless there are extenuating circumstances. And I would think a global pandemic demonstrates extenuating circumstances, as well as, backup from a medical physician stating what's best for their patient. So all of that was completely ignored. And, fortunately for me, I had a good job. I have a good job that I have extra money in order to provide for additional accommodations and provide for whatever I needed to make myself comfortable during this treatment process. Not everybody has that opportunity. And then what I found out later as well, by talking to different people in First Nations Health Authority, that this is only the case for cancer patients. And if I was coming down for, say, blood transfusions or kidney dialysis, I would be treated a different way. Dealing or getting the cancer diagnosis and, navigating my way through that with all of the internal healing that I had to do and overcome, and the trauma I had to deal with as a result of that, I started a coaching business. So I'm a transformational coach. So I coach people, and I help them get, I help them realize what their limiting beliefs are, and get them over those limiting beliefs, and create the momentum to really bring their dreams into reality. So, coaches don't have an answer for you. They don't tell you what you have to do, but they help you see what's already inside of you. And, having had coaches myself in the past, I really look to them to help me unpack all of that stuff that I just pushed down and dealt with and move on, where they help me really, take those bits out of those deep, dark places inside of myself, and helped me see who I really am, to see that empowered person, the person who is going to be in service to people who need me, the person who is going to do what's right and help other people do that as well. One of the things that I was able to successfully do through my journey with cancer is to choose grace over suffering. And I've done some talks on that in different women's groups, because it's really important for people to understand that we have a choice. And we talked about this, with the fight or flight response with the cancer diagnosis. But in anything that we're dealt with in life, we have a choice. And it's making the right choice for the right reasons. By coaching people, helping them look at what their core values are and helping them realize what their dreams are, simply by tapping into what they already have inside of them and bringing that to the forefront, and thereby empowering them to create a new reality for themselves. So my business is Elevate and Empower Coaching and Consulting. And I was quite excited to get that off the ground. I had started it prior to diagnosis, just prior. I had registered the business in September of 2019 and was all excited to get going. And, cancer put the brakes on that. Coaches can take you places that you haven't been to before, but if they haven't been there themselves, it makes things a little bit harder to identify with the people that you're working with. So in that way, cancer was a blessing for me, and it helped me realize what I needed to do to transform it, so that I can also work with my clients to identify what they need to transform to have a better outcome for themselves, or the outcome that they create.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.